Alpha stood atop the shattered remnants of the Nexus core chamber, the air thick with the scent of scorched crystal and metal. The echoes of the explosion still seemed to reverberate through his bones. Around him, faint arcs of residual energy flickered across the fractured walls, the last remnants of a power that could have saved or doomed their world. Lyra leaned against a jagged shard of crystal, her breath shallow and uneven. Her usually luminous eyes flickered with unstable energy, a faint glow pulsing beneath her skin. Alpha moved to her side, steadying her with a hand on her shoulder. "Lyra, are you?" "I'm fine," she interrupted, though her voice trembled. She clutched her chest as if trying to contain something within. "It's the core. When it shattered, I felt something. I don't know how to describe it." Alpha searched her gaze, his own exhaustion mirrored in her eyes. They had succeeded in destroying the Trion's weapon, but the cost had been greater than he had anticipated. The Nexus core was gone. Their strongest hope of turning the war had slipped through their fingers. "We need to get back," Alpha said softly. "The Council will be waiting." The journey to the surface was a somber one. The tunnels beneath Wax, once radiant with the energy that powered their world, now seemed dimmer, as if the planet itself mourned the loss of the core. When they emerged into the city, the devastation became clear. Buildings of crystalline glass lay shattered, their iridescent fragments scattered across the streets. Energy shields that had once protected the city had failed during the attack, leaving scars of laser fire across the once pristine structures. Fires still smoldered in the distance, casting flickering shadows across the broken skyline. Wax citizens moved through the ruins, their normally graceful movements weighed down with sorrow and fear. Alpha's gaze fell upon a mother cradling her child beside the remains of their home. The child clung to a small crystal figurine, one of the traditional symbols of hope. Alpha clenched his fists at his sides, the weight of their suffering pressing down on him. A voice echoed through his mind, unbidden. Elisa's voice. "You must protect them, Alpha. No matter the cost." He took a steadying breath and led Lyra toward the council chamber. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Counselors stood in small clusters, their hushed conversations ceasing as Alpha approached. The faint hum of energy monitors displayed reports from across the planet, casualty counts, damaged infrastructure, and the alarming depletion of their defensive reserves. Counselor Thelo stepped forward, his eyes sharp with accusation. "Alpha, the destruction of the Nexus core has weakened us beyond measure. Without its power, our shields are failing. The Trions will exploit this." "What were you thinking?" Alpha met his gaze without flinching. "I made the only choice I could. If the Trions had harnessed the core, they would have wiped us from existence. We would be gone. All of us. And now we stand exposed," another counselor interjected. "We placed our trust in you, Alpha. But at what cost?" Before Alpha could respond, Lyra stepped forward, her voice firm despite the weariness in her frame. "Blame me if you must. I was the one who insisted the core had to be destroyed. But we can't afford to dwell on what's lost. We need to focus on what we still have and what we can still become." Silence followed her words, heavy with unspoken doubts and fears. Alpha placed a hand on her shoulder, both to steady her and to show his support. "I will not ask for your forgiveness," Alpha said. "Only your resolve. The Trions will come again. We must be ready." As the council deliberated, Alpha and Lyra stepped away from the chamber, seeking a moment of solitude. Outside, beneath the fractured skyline, Alpha gazed at the distant stars. Somewhere among them, the Trion fleet was preparing for its next assault. "We'll find a way," Lyra said softly beside him. Alpha glanced at her, the faint glow beneath her skin still visible. Whatever had happened during the destruction of the core, it had changed her. Perhaps, Alpha thought, that change would be the key to their survival. He looked to the stars once more, determination hardening in his chest. No matter the cost, he would protect his people. And this time, he would not fail. Hours after the council meeting, Alpha stood alone in the heart of the ruined city. The air still carried the metallic tang of energy residue, and faint echoes of distant repair crews clanged against the broken skyline. The once vibrant energy streams that had coursed through Wax's crystalline infrastructure flickered weakly, their pulse slowed by the absence of the Nexus core. Alpha knelt, brushing his fingers against a shard of crystal embedded in the ground. A faint warmth resonated from within it, as though the planet's energy still stirred beneath the scars of war. He closed his eyes, reaching out with his mind to sense the pulse of Wax's core, the heart of the world that sustained their civilization. The connection was faint, distant, like a fading heartbeat struggling to persist. A presence stirred beside him. Alpha opened his eyes to find Lyra approaching, her steps careful as she navigated the debris-strewn street. The faint glow beneath her skin had not faded, and her gaze carried a depth of emotion that sent a ripple of unease through Alpha's chest. "You should be resting," he said quietly. "I tried," she replied. "But something's different. Since the core shattered, I can feel," she hesitated, searching for the right words. "Something within me. A resonance. Like the core's energy didn't vanish. It merged with me." Alpha stood, studying her carefully. The Nexus core had been a construct of immense power, capable of amplifying the Wax's natural energy manipulation abilities beyond measure. If even a fraction of that energy had fused with Lyra. "Have you tested it?" he asked. "I tried to channel it," she admitted. "But it's unstable. When I concentrate, I can feel the energy rising inside me, but it pushes back, like it's trying to break free." She lowered her gaze. "I'm afraid if I lose control, I could hurt someone." Alpha placed a hand on her shoulder. "Then we'll learn to control it together. This energy may be the key to turning the tide of the war." Lyra glanced toward the horizon, where faint lights of distant cities flickered against the night. "The Trions won't wait long before their next assault. We have to act quickly. I've already started analyzing the energy patterns within me. There might be a way to stabilize them, to harness the power without risking another collapse." Alpha's thoughts shifted to the Council's growing dissent. Many of the counselors viewed the destruction of the core as a mistake, a loss that had crippled their defensive capabilities. If they learned that Lyra now carried a fragment of that power, opinions could shift, but it would also place a dangerous target on her back. "Until we know more, we keep this between us," Alpha said. "The Council is already divided. We can't risk further chaos." Lyra nodded, but her expression held a flicker of doubt. "Alpha, what if this power wasn't meant for me? What if?" A distant hum cut through the air, faint but unmistakable. Alpha tensed, his senses sharpening as he turned toward the source. On the far edge of the horizon, a cluster of faint blue lights flickered against the night sky, too distant to make out clearly, but the rhythmic pattern of their formation was unmistakable. Trion scout ships. "They've found us," Lyra whispered. Alpha activated his communicator, contacting the city's defense network. "This is Alpha. Trion scouts approaching from the eastern perimeter. Activate perimeter shields and prepare for interception." As alarms began to echo through the city, Alpha turned to Lyra, his voice low but urgent. "Stay close to me. Whatever happens, we face this together." Lyra met his gaze, determination hardening her features. Together. As they moved toward the city's defense command center, Alpha felt the weight of fate settling upon his shoulders once more. But this time, hope burned beside him, not in the form of technology or weapons, but in the heart of the woman who had become more than a scientist, more than a warrior. She had become their last chance. The calm that had settled over Wax after the council meeting shattered as distant alarms began to echo through the underground corridors. Without warning, the night sky above the surface erupted in violent light. Trion warships, previously hidden by the thick cover of space, emerged like predators descending upon their prey. The Wax defense network, already strained by the recent devastation, flared to life in a desperate bid to repel the enemy. Alpha, still reeling from the Council's difficult decision and Lyra's revelations about her newfound power, rushed toward the command center. The tremors of battle vibrated through the very stone of the subterranean tunnels. In the distance, explosions rocked the surface as the Trions launched their counterattack with unrelenting fury. On the surface, the Trions advanced in a relentless barrage. Plasma cannons discharged searing beams that tore through the remnants of Wax's protective shields, reducing crystalline towers to rubble. The once proud capital, with its shimmering spires and carefully maintained energy grids, now lay in chaos. Civilians and soldiers alike scrambled for safety, their cries muffled by the roar of collapsing structures and the piercing sound of incoming fire. Deep underground, within the command center's fortified walls, Alpha's gaze was fixed on the live feed from the defense drones. The screen revealed the full scope of the assault. Rows of Trion fighters swooped low over the city, while massive warships rained destruction upon key infrastructure. The sensors reported that the enemy's precision had improved, a sign they had learned from previous encounters and were now determined to crush Wax once and for all. Lyra joined him in front of the display, her eyes wide with both fear and resolve. "They're not holding back this time," she said quietly. "Every system is compromised. We're on the brink." Alpha's jaw tightened as he watched the unfolding carnage. "We have no choice but to assume the worst. The Trions have mobilized all their forces. We must alert the evacuation teams and reinforce the central shelters." Outside, the subterranean corridors filled with Wax soldiers rushing to secure the underground cities. The heavy rumble of engines and the sharp crack of energy weapons provided a constant, brutal soundtrack. As Alpha coordinated orders, the feed on the screen shifted to live images of the surface. The devastation was complete. What had once been a thriving metropolis was now a battlefield of scorched earth and shattered hopes. Amid the chaos, a squad of Trion ground forces surged forward, their armor glinting with cruel precision under the harsh lights. They advanced in formation, their movements almost choreographed, as if each step was calculated to maximize destruction. The Trion's weapons discharged in rapid succession, sending columns of energy into the ranks of Wax defenders. The sound was deafening, a relentless barrage that hammered the fragile defenses into submission. Alpha's voice resonated through the command center as he barked orders into his communicator. "All units, fall back to the central shelter. Reinforce every line. Do not let them breach the core." His tone was cold and unwavering, a stark contrast to the pandemonium outside. Lyra's eyes flickered with determination as she stepped forward. "We have to use our new defensive algorithms. The data I gathered shows that if we recalibrate the energy shields to focus on the central core, we might withstand their attack a little longer." She worked swiftly at a nearby console, her fingers flying over the holographic interface as she input the necessary commands. The display shifted, and for a brief moment, the central district's shields pulsed with a renewed strength. Yet, the relief was short-lived. The Trions were adapting. Their next volley of fire seemed to target the newly reinforced areas specifically. The feedback loop from the recalibration glitched, sending erratic bursts of energy that only served to expose more of the capital's vulnerable points. A deafening explosion rocked the command center as part of the surface fell silent. Another district had been obliterated. Alpha's heart pounded as he realized that the enemy was methodically dismantling Wax's resistance. Every second counted, and with each passing moment, the balance tipped further in favor of the Trions. Within the chaos, Alpha's thoughts drifted briefly to Lyra. Her unwavering resolve and the dangerous power coursing through her veins were their greatest assets, but also their biggest risk. If the Trions could harness that power, they would have a weapon beyond measure. And now, with the Wax defenses faltering, that possibility loomed large. Alpha's eyes burned with determination. "We must hold on," he said, more to himself than to anyone else. "We must not let them win. Our survival depends on our ability to adapt, to learn, and to fight back with everything we have." The command center buzzed with urgency as more reports came in. The Trions were systematically isolating key strategic points. Alpha's gaze shifted from the live feeds to the faces of his soldiers in the room, each one etched with the resolve of those who had already lost too much. In that grim moment, with the capital crumbling above them and the enemy's fury unabated, the true cost of the war became painfully clear. The Wax were under siege, and their fate would be decided in the next few minutes of relentless battle. The tension was palpable. With every heartbeat, Alpha steeled himself for the challenges ahead. The enemy was closing in, and the survival of Wax hinged on their ability to withstand the Trions' next assault. The Council's decision had set Wax on a perilous path, but Alpha knew that waiting in uncertainty would only lead to further loss. With the weight of every sacrifice and every fallen comrade upon him, he made his choice. The rare energy source, the last hope to power their new defenses and weapons, was rumored to lie on a distant, hostile planet. More than that, his heart refused to let Lyra remain captive. He would not leave her behind. Alpha stood before the assembled council, his voice steady despite the storm of doubt swirling within him. We cannot continue to hide underground and hope the enemy never finds us. We must act. I will lead a mission to retrieve the energy source we desperately need, and I will rescue Lyra. His words cut through the silence like a clarion call, carrying the promise of defiance even in the face of inevitable danger. The council reacted with a mix of admiration and fear. Some faces lit up with hope, others bore the scars of endless battles and whispered that this would be a death sentence. But Alpha's resolve was unyielding. He had already made countless sacrifices to protect Wax, and he would risk everything again if it meant preserving their future. In the days that followed, preparations began at a fevered pace. Engineers and scientists worked alongside seasoned warriors to ready a stolen Trion vessel for the journey. Every piece of equipment was scrutinized and recalibrated for the treacherous journey ahead. The plan was simple in theory: fly to the distant world, secure the rare energy, and, along the way, penetrate the enemy stronghold to retrieve Lyra. In practice, it was a gamble that could cost him his life and the lives of those who followed. Alpha spent long hours poring over ancient data and star charts, his mind focused on mapping a route through dangerous hyperspace corridors and unpredictable energy storms. The planet in question was shrouded in mystery, a hostile world marked by ruins of an extinct alien civilization and violent bursts of cosmic energy. It was a world where few dared to tread, and none had returned unchanged. Late into the night, as the city above continued its preparations and repairs, Alpha found a quiet corner in his private quarters. His eyes, usually alight with determination, now flickered with a heavy burden. He recalled memories of simpler times, when the Wax thrived in peace, and wondered if the cost of this mission might be too high. But then he remembered Lyra's unwavering gaze and the hope in her eyes, even in the darkest moments. That hope was the spark that had kept their people fighting all these years. He rose and addressed his small team of elite warriors. We leave at dawn. Our target is that distant planet. We must secure the energy source and bring Lyra back, no matter the cost. We have trained for moments like this. Remember, the future of Wax depends on our success. His team listened intently, their faces reflecting both resolve and the fear of the unknown. They had been through too much to back down now. Alpha's conviction became their rallying cry, a final surge of hope in a time when every decision could be the difference between survival and annihilation. Alpha knew the risks were enormous. The journey would take them through enemy territory, into a realm where the laws of physics seemed to bend, and where the planet itself might be hostile. Yet he felt no hesitation. The time for retreat had passed. His destiny, and that of Wax, demanded this sacrifice. As dawn approached, the stolen vessel was readied. Engines hummed with untamed power, and the crew moved with determined urgency. Alpha stood at the helm, his gaze fixed on the dark horizon beyond the atmosphere. He could feel the weight of every life on Wax, every lost promise, pressing upon him. But he also carried the spark of hope, the belief that this final gamble would turn the tide of the war. With a final nod to his team, Alpha activated the vessel's launch sequence. The craft shuddered, then roared into the sky, piercing through the twilight as it embarked on a journey that would test every ounce of their strength, determination, and unity. And as the vessel vanished into the void, Alpha whispered a vow into the darkness: "I will not fail you, Lyra. I will bring you home, and together we will fight for the future of Wax." In the dim recesses of the Trion warship, amid shattered displays and failing power grids, Boric lay wounded but not defeated. His once pristine obsidian armor was scarred and dented, evidence of the devastating assault that had shattered the Nexus core. Blood, glowing with an otherworldly crimson, streaked along his battle-worn gauntlets, and his breathing was labored, each breath a struggle against pain and rage. Vorek's eyes, usually cold and calculating, now burned with an intensity that bordered on madness. He rose slowly from the ground, every movement deliberate as if fueled by a single, overwhelming purpose. Around him, his remaining forces regrouped, their attention fixed on the figure who now embodied both resilience and fury. The destruction of the core had been a blow not only to the Wax, but to the Trions as well. For Vorek, it signified that the balance of power was shifting in ways he had not foreseen. He paced the corridor, his heavy boots echoing in the near-empty hall as he stopped before a shattered viewport. Through the fractured glass, the remnants of the Wax capital glowed in the distance, a symbol of hope now reduced to ruins. With a voice low and resonant, he spoke to no one and everyone at once. "They have defied us. They have taken from us what was meant to be ours, a power that could have changed everything. And that traitor, that insignificant human interference, has left our true prize, the secret of their energy, vulnerable." His words were a bitter oath. Vorek's mind churned with the conviction that Lyra's unique energy abilities were the key to unlocking an ancient power hidden deep within the Trion race, an energy force that, if harnessed, would grant his people dominion over the cosmos. The very thought of that power, now tainted by Lyra's capture, ignited a fury in him that bordered on fanaticism. He raised his arm slowly, his voice echoing through the darkened hall. "I swear by the ancient rights of our forebears, by every shard of our unyielding spirit, that I will reclaim what is rightfully ours. I will hunt her down, piece by piece if necessary, until Lyra is back in our grasp. Her energy is our legacy, the key to our ascension. Without her, the promise of our true power remains unfulfilled." As he spoke, his tone shifted from wrath to determination, a promise that his vengeance would not fade with time, but instead grow ever more potent. Vorek's gaze hardened as he envisioned the day when he would confront Alpha and the Wax. The idea of her being used as a bargaining chip or worse, a weapon against the Trions, was intolerable. His vow was not just personal, it was a declaration to his entire people that the Trions would never be outdone by the Wax, that they would reclaim their strength by any means necessary. The echo of his oath resonated in the empty corridors, mingling with the distant hum of the ship's failing systems. In that cold, dark place, Vorek's promise took on a life of its own, a vow of vengeance that would drive him forward, no matter the cost. The fate of Lyra, and with it the fate of the hidden power of the Trions, was now bound to his unyielding resolve. With his oath spoken and his purpose clear, Vorek turned away from the viewport and began issuing orders in a voice that brooked no dissent. His wounded form moved with surprising agility as he rallied his remaining troops. The mission was set: track down every trace of the Wax's interference, capture Lyra, and harness the power that had eluded him. Every step he took was measured, every word spoken a promise that the Trions would rise again, stronger, fiercer, and utterly unrelenting. And so, with darkness enveloping him, Vorek's vow of vengeance echoed through the corridors of the warship, a harbinger of the relentless pursuit that would soon plunge the entire galaxy into a new, brutal conflict. The stolen vessel sliced through the vast emptiness of space as Alpha led his small elite team away from Wax. The ship's engines pulsed steadily, casting a dim glow over the cramped cockpit and guiding them toward the uncharted world rumored to hold the rare energy source. The vessel vibrated with the raw power of its engines, and every control panel flickered with streams of data, a reminder of the desperate gamble they had taken. In one quiet corner of the ship, Lyra sat, her eyes fixed on the endless stars outside. The absence of the Nexus core had left a void in Wax's defenses, but something else had taken root in her. Since the core's destruction, she had begun to experience strange surges of power, a residual echo of the energy that had once flowed through that massive construct. At first, the sensation was subtle, a soft pulsing at the edge of her consciousness. But as the hours passed, it grew into vivid, almost tangible visions. In the stillness between battles, Lyra's mind would drift into strange realms. She saw flashes of ancient temples carved entirely of crystalline material, bathed in eerie violet light. In her visions, shadowy figures moved with purpose in these long-forgotten halls, their eyes burning with an otherworldly fire. Symbols and inscriptions danced before her eyes, hinting at secrets that connected the wax and the Trions in ways she could barely comprehend. At times, a deep, resonant hum would echo in her ears, a sound that seemed to originate from the very heart of the universe. She felt as though the shattered core had left behind not just fragments of power, but a hidden legacy meant only for her. Even as Alpha focused on steering the vessel through hazardous cosmic currents, he couldn't help noticing the distant look in Lyra's eyes. She would sometimes stare blankly at the star-speckled darkness, as if listening to a call only she could hear. When she finally spoke, her voice trembled with both wonder and unease. "There is something inside me now, a power, a connection to a force older than our war," she said softly. "I see images, ancient worlds, forgotten temples, and a secret that binds us to the Trions. I'm not sure what it means, but it feels like the key to everything." Alpha's heart pounded as he considered her words. He had always known that the Nexus core was more than a weapon. It was a source of untapped energy and mystery. Now, with Lyra's visions emerging, he suspected that there was a hidden truth in their enemy's history, one that could either be their salvation or their undoing. As the vessel continued its journey toward the hostile planet, the crew worked silently, their focus unwavering despite the palpable tension. Alpha reviewed star charts and navigational data, plotting a course through dangerous hyperspace corridors. Meanwhile, Lyra retreated into herself, her mind a battleground where memories of the core and cryptic visions intermingled. The energy pulsing within her felt like a living presence, guiding her to secrets long buried beneath the stars. Every mile brought them closer to the unknown. The destination, a planet of harsh, unpredictable energy storms and ancient ruins, was said to harbor the rare element necessary to power the wax's new defenses. Alpha knew that retrieving this resource was their only hope, and that it might also unlock the mystery that Lyra now embodied. In the silence of the vessel's corridors, punctuated by the steady hum of the engines and the occasional burst of data on the control panels, Alpha and Lyra's unspoken connection deepened. Their shared determination was now intertwined with the weight of destiny, each step forward not only a journey toward a crucial energy source, but also a step closer to uncovering a secret that could change the course of the war forever. With the stars as their only witness, Alpha and his team pressed onward into the darkness, every moment charged with anticipation and uncertainty. The journey was no longer just a mission for survival, it was a quest to reclaim a hidden power and to unravel a mystery that might hold the key to victory or the downfall of Wax. In the wake of the relentless assaults, the Wax knew that the surface was no longer safe. With their primary defenses shattered and their energy reserves dangerously depleted, the focus turned inward. Deep beneath the ruined capital, the underground cities, once a hidden refuge, became the last bastion of their civilization. In vast subterranean halls and tunnels, engineers, scientists, and warriors labored side by side to reinforce the old structures and build new protective shields around their people. Alpha and Lyra led the effort with a singular purpose. Alpha oversaw the rapid construction of new energy barriers that could withstand even the Trion's most advanced weapons, while Lyra, drawing on the strange, unpredictable power that had fused with her after the core's destruction, guided a team of researchers in developing an entirely new class of defensive technology. The scientists worked around the clock, their faces lit by the glow of holographic interfaces and pulsating energy fields. They were racing against time to stabilize Lyra's newfound abilities, hoping to harness her internal power as the key to a weapon that could turn the tide of the war. In one crowded lab beneath the central command, Lyra explained her findings to a group of determined researchers. "The energy within me is raw and chaotic," she said, her voice steady despite the urgency in the room. But if we can learn to channel it, if we can synchronize it with our shield algorithms, we might create a barrier strong enough to deflect the Trion's most devastating attacks. This isn't just about survival, it's about taking control of our future. Meanwhile, Alpha moved through the corridors of the underground city, inspecting the new fortifications and listening to reports from field commanders. His face was etched with determination and worry. Every improvement, every reinforced wall was a testament to their struggle, but he knew the Trions would not relent. Their next assault could come at any moment, and the Wax had to be ready. In the strategy room, a digital map of Waxa's remaining territory glowed on the central screen. Lines of energy and data flickered over the display, showing weakened outer defenses and vulnerable points in the city's protective network. "We have to assume the worst," Alpha said to the gathered officers. "The Trions will launch another full-scale attack soon, and our only chance lies in using this new technology. Every second we delay could cost us everything." The mood in the room was somber, yet there was a palpable undercurrent of hope. Despite the setbacks and the overwhelming odds, the Wax were uniting in their effort to survive. Alpha's decision to rely on their own ingenuity and on the unpredictable power within Lyra had instilled a cautious optimism among his people. Outside the makeshift laboratories, in the heart of the underground cities, the hum of machinery, the clang of metal, and the steady rhythm of human determination blended into a symphony of survival. As new defensive systems were installed and prototype energy weapons tested, Alpha and Lyra shared quiet moments amid the chaos, brief exchanges that reaffirmed their unspoken bond and the promise that, together, they would not let Wax fall. The preparations were massive and fraught with uncertainty. Yet as the Wax soldiers and scientists toiled under flickering lights in the subterranean depths, one truth remained clear. The Wax had no choice but to adapt, to reinvent themselves, and to prepare for the next invasion. Their survival depended on it, and the hope of reclaiming their world rested on every new barrier raised and every pulse of energy harnessed. The preparations were in full swing in the underground cities when a strange ripple in the communications network caught Alpha's attention. It was an encrypted message, a signature he had not seen in decades, a name from a past he had long buried. The message promised help in exchange for a meeting at a secure location outside the city walls. Despite his reservations, Alpha knew that in times of desperation, even a tenuous alliance might be worth considering. Later that night, as the underground corridors hummed with the steady beat of machinery and the quiet determination of Wax soldiers, a sleek, unfamiliar vessel landed near the city's outer perimeter. The craft was unlike any Wax design: sleek lines, dark reflective surfaces, and an aura of advanced technology that hinted at secrets from a bygone era. A single figure emerged from the vessel, cloaked in an aura of mystery. His presence was both commanding and enigmatic, his eyes carrying the weight of experiences that Alpha recognized all too well. The figure stepped into the dim light of a narrow corridor where Alpha had arranged a discreet meeting. For a long moment, the silence between them was heavy with unspoken history. Finally, the stranger spoke in a voice that was both calm and measured. "Alpha, it has been too long. I come with an offer that may help you, and the Wax, if you are willing to listen." Alpha's heart pounded as memories surged back. The man before him was Trion, once a trusted friend and a formidable warrior whose loyalty had been questioned in times past. Now he appeared older, his face etched with lines of hardship and regret, yet his eyes still shone with the same unyielding resolve. "Trion," Alpha said slowly, his voice cautious, "why have you come now? What do you want in return?" Trion's gaze was steady. "I know the path you walk is fraught with peril. I have spent years gathering intelligence beyond the borders of Wax, and I have seen things that even you might find hard to believe. The Trions are planning something that could annihilate us all, and I have information that can help turn the tide. But to act on it, you must trust me, and that may cost you more than you are willing to pay." Alpha listened intently as Trion outlined a plan that involved covert operations, advanced technologies, and a delicate balancing act between old alliances and new opportunities. Yet, beneath Trion's words, a current of ambiguity pulsed. His motives were not entirely clear. The offer of help might be genuine, or it could be a calculated move designed to sow discord among the Wax. The prospect of human intervention, long dismissed by Alpha, now hovered like a shadow over his decision. In a private meeting with a few trusted advisors later that night, Alpha presented Trion's proposal. The council was divided. Some saw the arrival of Trion as a blessing, a chance to access resources and knowledge that might fortify Wax against the impending Trion onslaught. Others, scarred by past betrayals and wary of any external influence, urged caution. "This man is from your past, Alpha," one advisor said quietly. "Can we really trust him after everything that happened?" Alpha's mind raced through countless memories, moments of camaraderie and betrayal, victories and regrets. He knew that accepting help from Trion might open the door to unforeseen consequences, yet the alternative was unthinkable. With the Trions tightening their grip on the battlefield and the Wax defenses crumbling above, the cost of isolation was far too great. Standing before the assembled council, Alpha's voice carried the weight of his burden. "I will consider this offer, but we must proceed with extreme caution. If Trion's intelligence is as vital as he claims, it could be the key to our survival. But if this is a trap, then we must be prepared to face the consequences." His words were met with murmurs and heavy silence. The decision was fraught with risk, but in that moment, the only path forward was to explore every possibility, even those born from old alliances that had once been shattered by betrayal. As the night deepened, Alpha and Trion continued their private conversation away from prying eyes. In the soft glow of a secluded chamber, Trion revealed hints of an ancient power hidden within the Trion ranks, a power that might be harnessed to create a weapon capable of turning the tide of war. But the details remained murky, cloaked in layers of secrecy and uncertainty. Alpha's mind churned with conflicting emotions, hope that this alliance could save Wax, and fear that it might lead them into even greater peril. In the end, Alpha knew that he had no choice but to proceed. With the Wax on the brink of extinction and the Trions poised for their next strike, every decision carried enormous weight. The mysterious offer from Trion, whether a blessing or a curse, was a gamble that might be their last hope. As dawn broke over the underground cities, Alpha prepared to give the order to move forward with Trion's plan. The future of Wax hung in the balance, and in that fragile moment, the path of survival was paved with both promise and uncertainty. A tense silence fell over Wax as the first signs of an approaching force filled the horizon. From the dark expanse of space, a massive Trion fleet emerged, far larger and more imposing than any seen before. Their ships, sleek and angular, glowed with an eerie red luminescence as they closed in on the Wax capital. The very sky seemed to darken under the weight of their collective presence, and the ground trembled in response to the distant rumble of engines. Alpha stood on the edge of a fortified outpost, his eyes fixed on the unfolding sight. The air was heavy with foreboding as the Trion flagship, a towering behemoth of weaponry and dread, led the formation. Its energy cannons began to charge, casting flickering beams across the ruined skyline. Amid the chaos and desperation, a sharp, authoritative voice burst through every communication channel. "Surrender, Lyra, or see your civilization reduced to ash," the voice proclaimed with cold certainty. It was General Crylon, his tone leaving no room for negotiation. The ultimatum struck deep. Every Wax soldier, every citizen, felt the chilling certainty of their vulnerability. Within the underground cities, the Wax Council and military leaders gathered in haste. Digital maps and real-time sensor readings illuminated their anxious faces, showing the full scale of the impending assault. The new defensive structures, painstakingly built in the wake of the Nexus core's destruction, flickered with unstable energy. Yet, even these reinforcements appeared fragile in the face of the overwhelming enemy fleet. Alpha's mind raced as he absorbed the message. The humans had abandoned them, and now no external aid would come. The fate of Wax rested solely on their own strength and ingenuity. His gaze shifted to Lyra, who stood among his elite warriors, her face etched with determination despite the exhaustion in her eyes. In that brief moment of silent communion, Both understood that the coming battle was a final test of their resolve. "We have no choice," Alpha said quietly to the assembled officers. "We stand, we fight, and we do not yield. Wax will not fall into their hands." His voice carried the weight of a leader who had already sacrificed too much. Outside, the Trion fleet began its descent, and the first salvo of energy bolts streaked toward the city, igniting the atmosphere in a torrent of violent light. The ground shuddered as explosions rocked the outer defenses. Wax soldiers moved quickly to activate every last measure of their defensive grid, channeling Lyra's unstable energy into makeshift shields. Every second brought new danger, and every heartbeat echoed with the possibility of annihilation. Alpha raised his hand to silence the rising chaos. "Prepare for countermeasures. All units, fall back to the central shelter and brace for impact. This is our last stand, and we will not surrender." As the enemy barrage intensified, Alpha's thoughts flickered to the promise he had made to his people and to Lyra. In the midst of destruction, the fierce determination of the Wax shone through. They had fought too long to allow themselves to be broken now. The storm of war had truly broken. Explosions lit the sky like bursts of dying stars, and the relentless Trion assault pressed closer with each passing moment. Alpha's voice, resolute and unwavering, carried over the din of battle as he ordered his forces to hold the line. The Wax would fight until their last breath. And so, with the enemy's ultimatum echoing in the air and the full force of the Trion fleet bearing down upon them, the final chapter of this desperate struggle had begun, one in which the survival of Wax, the hope of a people, and the future of everything they held dear hung in the balance. Fire and smoke consumed the outer districts of Wax as the Trion bombardment intensified. Towers of crystalline light shattered under the relentless assault, their energy cores erupting in violent bursts that sent shockwaves rippling through the earth. The protective shields, hastily reinforced after the Nexus core's destruction, faltered against the sheer force of the attack. Alarms wailed through the underground cities, echoing the collective heartbeat of a civilization on the brink. Alpha stood atop the central command platform, his eyes tracing the fiery arcs of destruction that streaked across the horizon. The air crackled with unstable energy as the Wax defenders retaliated with every weapon at their disposal, energy cannons blazing upward, striking the dark void where Trion ships loomed like predatory shadows. Yet, for every enemy vessel that fell in flames, more descended to take its place. Beside Alpha, Lyra stood firm despite the chaos swirling around them. Her eyes glowed faintly with residual power from her exposure to the Nexus core, and her breath came in measured beats as she struggled to suppress the unstable surges within her. She clenched her fists, sensing the desperate need of her people, the fear that clung to the air like static before a storm. Yet, beneath the fear was determination, unyielding and fierce. Explosions rippled through the defensive walls, sending debris raining into the streets. Alpha's comm device crackled to life with urgent reports. "Sector 7 breached. We're falling back. Energy cannons are overheating. We can't hold them off much longer. Enemy ground forces inbound. Heavy infantry deploying near the western perimeter." The Wax defenders, though trained and armed, struggled against the relentless advance of the Trion soldiers, warriors bred for conquest, their armor impervious to most conventional weapons. Even the newly developed energy blades strained against the Trion's advanced shielding. The ground itself trembled as armored walkers, towering constructs of metal and plasma, smashed through barricades, scattering defenders like autumn leaves before a gale. Alpha activated the comms, his voice cutting through the rising panic. "Hold your ground. Fall back to the inner perimeter, but do not abandon your positions. We fight together, and we do not yield. Lyra, with me, it's time to make our stand." Lyra turned to him, her gaze steady despite the chaos surrounding them. Her heart pounded with a mixture of fear and resolve as she stepped closer. "Alpha, if I tap into my energy again." "Not yet," Alpha interrupted gently, placing a hand on her shoulder. "We don't know what it'll do to you. We need you alive. I need you alive." Her breath caught in her throat at the rare vulnerability in his voice, but there was no time for words. Another explosion rocked the platform, forcing them both to steady themselves. The sky burned with crimson fire as Trion dropships descended, unleashing squadrons of armored warriors into the heart of Wax. The battle had breached the final lines of defense, and soon there would be nowhere left to retreat. As Alpha and Lyra descended into the fray, the echoes of war surrounded them, blades clashing, energy cannons roaring, and the anguished cries of a civilization fighting for its very existence. Above it all, the distant silhouette of Vorik's flagship hovered like a specter of death, its massive cannons rotating into position as if preparing for a final, decisive blow. The night sky burned as if the heavens themselves had been set ablaze, and amidst the smoke and fire, two figures stood resolute, bound not only by duty, but by the unspoken bond that had grown between them. As Alpha raised his weapon and Lyra summoned the fractured energy within her, the battle for Wax's future truly began. And this time, neither love nor destiny would escape the flames of war.